Namaste, Hari Om, welcome. I'm Mathura Das. Welcome to my live shares. I'm calling it Between Worlds live share series because basically what I am presenting, apart from the chants and the songs, is a narrative, a story that I've been writing for quite a while, a manuscript called Between Worlds. And here I am. The East is over there, the West is here, matter is there, spirit there. Thank you, Abdul Ji. Nice to see you here, my dear friend from Lahore. So I know everything's fine now. Cool. So what I do is, this is from the southwest of England, and I'm going to do some Om chants. I'm going to do some prayers, and then I'm going to do a chant, a song, and then continue my talk, and then at the end I will do another song. The talk, for those who've just tuning in at the beginning, it's a narrative about how the East and the West come together. Hi, bros, and great to see all my friends. The East and West, how it came closer and closer together, and then it focuses on the British Empire, Calcutta, some characters, and Bhaktivedanta Swami, who brought the teachings of Sri Chaitanya from the East part of India and took it globally. And that's how I got my name, Mathura Das, which is the kind of essence of the talk, what's in the name. And so I'm going to carry on that talk later, so please stay with us and chant Om with me, or at home. And Om is the very kind of universal way of connecting with divine sound vibration. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And that carries through into most spiritual traditions. The name of God and God are identical. And Omkara is Om, A-U-M-R, is the most universal way. My mother, who wasn't belonging to any religion or spiritual group or belief, she loved chanting Om. Om Agyanatimirandasya Jananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swabadandhikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatamritam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Shri Radha Kanta Namostute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hui Priye. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhascha kripa sindhu gaivascha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Aye. Just have a sip. I'm going to do my Radhi Radhi Govinda with a little instrumental bit at the beginning, get you into the mood, get you in the mood of Vrindavan, the pastoral setting, and then we're going to go off into that space and the playground of Radha and Krishna and the bridge buses of Braj and Radhi Govinda and Govinda Jaya Jaya. I think that's what's the order of the day today. Okay. Radhi Radhi Govinda Govinda Radhi Radhe Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Govinda Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda 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 Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda 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 Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe 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 Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai 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 Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Bolo Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Bolo Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Bolo Gopala Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jai Jai Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Jai Jai. Radhe Radhe Govinda Gopala Jai Jai. Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda 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 Jai Jai. Radhe Radhe Govinda Gopala Jai Jai. Radhe Radhe Govinda Gopala Jai Jai. Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda. Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda. Radhe Radhe Govinda Gopala Jai Jai. 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 Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe. Radhe Radhe Govinda Govinda Radhe. Radhe Govinda Bolo Radhe Govinda. Bolo Shri Krishna Bhagavan Ki Jai. Radharani Maharani Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. I think I'm just going to do my just one more the chant. I'm going to do what the Bob Marley "So Much Trouble in the World" going into Sri Ram Jai Ram. I just feel like doing it. I like it. So it's Bob Marley's "So Much Trouble in the World." We don't even have to give a purport to that. It's kind of quite blatantly obvious. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. Bless my eyes this morning. The sun is on the rise once again. The way things are going, anything can happen, 'cause they're sailing on their ego trip. Blast off on their spaceship, miles from reality. No care for you, no care for me. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. So much trouble in the world. There is so much trouble in the world. All you gotta do is give a little, give a little, give a little bit one more time, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Bolo Sri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Sri Ram Jai Ram, Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai 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 Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai 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 Ram, Jai Jai, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, 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 Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram. Shri Krishna, Shri Ramachandra Bhagavana ki Jai. Spent quite a few days in Ayodhya. It's quite a nice place, really, even though it's become controversial in the last few years, but Jai Shri Ram. Ayodhya is to Ram as what Vrindavan is to Krishna. Welcome everybody, new and old friends, people who've been following, checking out my live shares. I think this is my 11th since started on Easter. And apart from the songs and the chants, the thing that's kind of carrying this through is this kind of narrative, this story that I've been telling, and with the name Between Worlds. And it's all based on a book that I was working on for 5 years about my life, trying to understand what made me me, and then realized how did this person from this place, Southwest London, get this name, all these sociological, historical processes that have been going on for hundreds of years. And then there's one from India, and then there's one which is involving psychedelics. And the last couple of my stories were concentrating on that. Some of the narratives have been about the bigger picture, and then gradually, as I get involved in the story, there's more of my story coming in it. And my story is not just my story. I don't want it to be just I did this and I did that. It's involving this quite complex phenomena that happened when the East and the West got closer and closer and closer in the 60s with the influence of psychedelics and the appearance of certain teachers, and specifically the focus on Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada and the Krishna organization, about what actually happened. Many people see Hare Krishnas maybe chanting down Oxford Street or somewhere, and they maybe look at them and go, wow, what, I wonder how they ended up there, or was one of them, you know. So my story is a bit about that, and it's also about what are they? What is this phenomena? And one of the things which is interesting about this story is that nothing is static. Everything has very specific time, place, and circumstances, scenarios, which I consider the three contextual pillars, really, of understanding anything: time, place, and the people, and the situation and the people involved. And then, because it changes, you know, within a few months, a whole situation can change and evolve. And so in my story, this is going to be happening now. And the whole point of my story is to be able to tell a bigger story, but seeing it through the perspective, obviously, of my eyes. And it's easy for me to tell the story because I'm not telling anybody else's story. I'm actually just bearing witness to what I experienced and what I discovered, what I went through, and what I learned through this period. And this is what I kind of want to share with people, because it's through life we all have various experiences, and as we get older, before we kick the bucket, like lots of my friends in our generation, I felt it's kind of only for posterity's sake and for history's sake, because the Krishna phenomena that I'm talking about, that got unleashed and inaugurated in the West by Srila Prabhupada, it's big. I mean, in India, it's gone massive and huge. And it's all over the world. And my generation's going to go, and then there's this next generation and the next generation. And I think that it'd be good for the future generations to look back and look at what actually happened at the beginning of in different parts of the world. People are telling this story about how this international Krishna movement, how did it develop, and what were the people involved, how did they do it, and what went on, really. And then they can all look back and they can ponder it and see if that's helpful for them understanding where they are at in their time. I mean, I'm quite interested in history, religious history. You can read interesting things about the Christian story with the discovery in the 40s of Dead Sea Scrolls or manuscript rolled up in a jar in a cave that have been left there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and then they pick them up. Or if you're into Greek history, you read Herodotus and all these people that they've written down these things, and so that thousands of years later, people can even actually have a little bit of an idea, anyway, of what actually happened back then. So this is how I see my little humble contribution, as telling a tale, a story, and as a service to the lineage that I came in contact with as part of kind of knowledge, as a service, so that people can learn from this and hopefully learn the mistakes, because there's going to be lots of those described as well. Lots of things are going on. At the moment, we haven't got to those kinds of parts of the story. I have just talked about my experience of going to Bhaktivedanta Manor, meeting Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. If you want to know about that, just go back to my last video and watch that. And what I didn't really discuss much about was, but there's not much to say, but because the lifestyle, I've discussed it, what the Hare Krishnas don't do anyway, is that they don't, strict Hare Krishnas in living in the ashram, and especially at that time, no animal products, lacto-vegetarian, but no killing of meat, fish or eggs, no intoxication of any kind, including tea or coffee, no ganja, marijuana, no LSD, nothing. And then apparently the very hard one that most people can't follow is, no, at least not their whole lives, is no illicit sex, which means, according to the traditional Indian system that Prabhupada abided by, and many people, a few people I know, even in Bengal, the traditional Brahmins, no sex outside of marriage and only sex for procreation. Seems unfathomable for most people to believe that, but that was one of the strictures. And no gambling. Which wasn't really a hard thing for most people, well, maybe for some. So those are the 4 things they didn't do. Now, what they do is they get up very early, and they have a whole set of kind of temple rituals if they're living in a temple. And this is what I got involved with at the Manor. There was a temple room downstairs with the forms of Radha and Krishna, and at specific times of the day they are worshipped according to the tradition. There are people involved called pujaris, and then there's cooks offering food. Krishna is worshipped a bit like a king, and at different times of the day, in the morning, breakfast, and then lunch, and then afternoon snacks, and then the evenings offered food. And you need quite a team of people to be able to pull this off. And ISKCON temples around the world are very popular amongst the Hindu Indian diaspora, which has left India, because the standard and the quality that Prabhupada set was very, very high. And the devotees follow quite a strict, very, very strict routine of hygiene about doing all of that, because previously this has never been done by Westerners. This has only been done by generally Brahmins and generally males in India, not kind of Westerners with no training. So quite a rigorous training goes on before you can even do that. So that's going on. But so you wake up in the morning and at about 4, because the morning ceremony is going to start off at 4:30. But you can imagine that the Bhaktivedanta Manor, when I was there at the time, there was, because Prabhupada was there was hundreds of people trying to get into the morning shower, and cold, no hot showers, and you're waiting in the line, and you go in there, and because you've got to go to the toilet, you've got to do this, and the devotees, they put markings on their bodies with sacred clay, with mantras, so they have to do all that before they get downstairs, and then you get there for 4:30, and the curtains open, and there's chanting and singing. And then there's generally there's a worship of the sacred plant called Tulsi that happens when the curtains close. The pujaris dress the deities, and then there's a long period where people do their japa, their rosary. And then later on, there's what's called the worship of the guru, and then the deities are greeted, and then there's a recitation, a daily recitation from verses from the Bhagavad Purana, or sometimes known as Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the kind of morning routine just before you have breakfast everywhere, most Krishna temples around the world. And it's not in many ashrams that just practice yoga. That's quite a kind of, sometimes they get up a bit later, but it's considered in yoga practices this time just before the dawn. It's called Brahma Muhurta. It's considered the most auspicious time of the day to perform spiritual life. And some people have say that it's related to the pineal gland is very active at that time, which is involved with perception and high levels of consciousness. So you're doing that every day, and then and you're abstaining from all these things, but then you're not just not doing things, you're doing many things. And I was, at that time, I was helping in the kitchen, going through the Bhagavad Gita and doing these routines, and that filled up my day. And I only had, I ended my last talk about this kind of, this revelation from a piece of paper this one devotee showed me about that, because I wasn't quite satisfied with wanting to join there. And I still had this option about going to college, but I really did want to go. And then suddenly I saw this bit of paper and it said, come to the happy Amsterdam temple where devotees smile at each other. And that was it. I knew at that moment that that's what I was going to do. And I think that day late, I left the Bhaktivedanta Manor. There was a lift going into London, and funnily it was going to just where my brother lived in Stoke Newington, his squat. And that was very interesting, just getting dropped off by the devotees. Bhajahari, dear Bhajahari, was in charge of the van, and I was telling him, yeah, I'm going to go off, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to go to Andy's. Going, yeah, we've heard that one before. He said, I bet you'll be smoking some hash before long, And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. I went in to see my brother and all his friends, and they were very intrigued, all 4 years older, and they were inquisitive and wondering what the Hare Krishnas were. And here there was their friend Nick's younger brother, Mark, who's kind of much more daring than any of them, and I've gone off and tried it, and they're all eager, and I told them all the story, and as they were doing that, they passed me a joint, and I just took one. And I have to say, it was, after doing all that pure style, it was incredible. And one of Nick's friends had an electric guitar downstairs, and I went and I did, wow, this is great. You just do a week of sadhana and clean out, and it's just like, wow, you're on top of it, But I didn't really want to get back into those habits, and I didn't really feel addicted to it anymore either, because I'd stopped smoking, and that really, I didn't need to do it all the time. So that was the first thing. And then I had this kind of talk with my brother. It may have been not quite then. It may have been a week or two later because I still hadn't, I had to go home and talk to my parents. Now, this was difficult. So during that kind of, I've been away at the temple for about a week, and I've already mentioned that, my father specifically was very hated religion. And I didn't really realize how much until I got involved with Krishna. My father had been brought up with an Orthodox kind of Jewish background, and he had hated everything about it and rejected all religion. But he never really expressed it. We weren't even aware of really being half Jewish, but genetically anyway. And then when I got home, there was an anxiety in my father's faith and my mother, and when I told them, yeah, I've decided this is what I'm doing, I'm going to go to Amsterdam. I'm not even 17 years old. I'm not just going to change my life, but I've decided to kind of leave England and go away from the family. And it didn't go down well. And we had a meal with a dear friend of the family, and they were trying to kind of talk to me. And while the parents weren't there, we went in a room, and she was trying to kind of, it's really worrying for your parents what you're doing, and da 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 da. And it was a lot of weight thrown at me, and I did consider them, but there was absolutely nothing I could do. It was I did feel for them. Especially my father, especially one day when I was up in my room and I was chanting japa, sitting and meditating. I was really into my japa and chanting. And my father came up to the room and he wanted to say something, and he just looked at me, and I looked at my father, and he just couldn't say what he was going to say, and he just kind of slammed the door, and I could see I was freaking him out. They didn't know what to do. And so I wrote a letter off to Amsterdam. I had the address saying I've seen this message, and I got the name of the person, Kula Shaker, sent it off. I didn't get a response. At least if it did come, it came after I left. But I needed the money to go to Amsterdam. Okay, and we're talking about the middle of September now, something like that. And I got a job through a temporary work job agency. And it wasn't too far away. It was at Brentford, and I could go on one bus ride there, 267, and it took about half an hour. And it was in a factory, this company called Coty, Coty, that makes perfumes, and it was a completely useless job where it had some purpose, obviously, but I had to take discarded perfume bottles and put them to this massive crushing machine with a mask over my face. Funny, like that, mask, isn't it? And to stop the fumes, because they were incredible. And just get those, I put them in these, they were collected in these plastic tubs that I put on a forklift truck, and I just had to drive them off and stack them at another place. That's all I had to do all day long. Now I had I went with my friend Gordon up to the Berry Place temple, and it was quite a different atmosphere than the Manor. It was very small and quite buzzy atmosphere. And there was a class given, and it was a small temple. And my friend Gordon bought the Bhagavad Gita, and I bought the Nectar of Devotion. Because I liked the title of it. I had no idea that it was going to be so highbrow and highfalutin. And while we were looking at it, when I got my book home, I liked it, but I really wanted to kind of start with the Gita. So I called up Gordon. I said, "Can you bring your Gita over? I just want to borrow it. I want to read that first." And he said, "Okay." So he brought the Gita, and I started to read that. I started with the Nectar of Devotion, which was a summary study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Rupa Goswami, one of the main disciples of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And it is very quite esoteric and high. It was wasn't really kind of good for somebody so fresh with the whole thing to understand it. I had to do the ABCs first, and Bhagavad Gita is considered the introduction to the whole kind of Hindu philosophy, Vaishnavism, everything's basically in that. So I'd started reading it at the Manor, and then I got this copy from my friend Gordon. And so I had it, and I was reading it, and I was chanting all the time, even though I didn't have beads. I was really, really absorbed in it, because now I'd actually made this decision. And I went to the college and told the principal about what had happened to me, this journey I was going through. And he seemed like the art anyway, because I was going to do a foundation art course. And it was quite psychedelic and kind of iconography. I did kind of this being that was like a Christ-like figure rising out of this thing with a ball of light and then something here and some far out psychedelic things. It was quite, I was really into kind of miniature. And I said, the kind of art I'm actually really like is the kind of art that the Krishna people are into. I like the Eastern art, the exotic art. Maybe I'd like to get involved with that maybe if I joined the Krishna movement. And he was, funnily enough, very sympathetic and said, good luck, and I wish you all the best, you know, and kind of, I hope you've made the right choice. And another thing that was happening as while I was having this job was I had my mother, when I made this decision, she had come up with a really reasonable alternative to dropping completely into it full time and going into the ashram and giving up college. She was, just before I made that choice, she said, why don't you carry on go to college and carrying your interest and your pursuits with the Krishna movement side by side, and then because then you have something to develop with your education, which was very reasonable. And you know, I have looked back on that in my life and wondered, I wonder what would have happened if I'd kept my interest but not joined the movement. But the impetus to kind of go gung ho fully into this, even though there were certain things that I wasn't quite sure about, still. I was really, really focused on doing this. And also my brother, I think he kind of popped over from Stoke Newington when he heard that I was really definitely going to do this thing. And we had a really nice conversation. And you see, we all had hair, and we'd all been very attached to our hair for years. And one of the things that was notable with the Hare Krishna thing is shaving your head. So, you know, he's saying, are you ready? You know, are you ready to shave your head and to do this? And I said, well, you know, I'm not that enthusiastic, but I could do it. I'm prepared to do that. Yeah, no problem. And he was just testing me, because it was actually one of the things, my last kind of attachment was my hair, even though I knew it was inevitable. I kind of wanted to keep it as long as I could. And I'd noticed that devotee, the artist Gopal, he'd been at the Windsor Free Festival. He still had hair. He was kind of connected with the temple. And this other devotee, Mahadev, had a bit of hair. So there was this obsession with keeping one's hair. But anyway, that was interesting, that little talk with my brother. And what actually happened was one day was this quite phenomenal thing. This was, I would say, in this whole process, of getting absorbed with all these various aspects of the philosophy of Krishna and reading the Bhagavad Gita, understanding about the karma, and then the different stages of meditation and focusing on Krishna and all of the purports by Prabhupada. I was just totally absorbed in this. And I'd had some interesting experiences from chanting. But one day, when I was at the factory, something happened, which kind of is one of the most powerful things that happened in my life, and was only going to be repeated maybe another 3 or 4 times in my life, this type of experience. So there I was by this big machine that was crushing perfume bottles, and I had this mask on, and I was chanting Hare Krishna, and I had this melody that I would mention the other. It was an A minor thing to a B minor thing, and it was this melody that I played, and it's the melody that I just got lost in my head. It wasn't the typical Hare Krishna, it wasn't that tune at all. It was Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And it was something like that anyway. And I had that in and I was chanting. And then, as I was chanting, I can't remember if I went through a process of thinking in my head, but suddenly the mantra became like an ocean. It wasn't just here on my mouth, and I wasn't just doing this mechanical thing. It suddenly kind of expanded, and it expanded from here. And I started to breathe really deeply, and I was trying to say the words Krishna, and it was very, very, very hard. And then I was sitting there, and I went into a state of ecstasy. basically. It's a kind of a blissful state. And as I looked around at around me at the factory, everything seemed to be glimmering and intensified, and I could really feel the presence of the divine. And I actually had I remembered seeing some of those shots from the Brother, Sun and Sister Moon with St. Francis going out and seeing the picture of Christ in the temple, and he was just the look, the expression, and then I actually kind of understood what type of things he must have been feeling, kind of in rapture, in spiritual rapture. And it went on, and I was sitting there and stunned by it. And there was this other guy working there at the factory I talked to I used to take my own vegetarian sandwiches and eat in the kind of place and have a cup of tea or something. And he would go there. And he was a follower of Guru Maharaji, and we didn't get into a too complex discussion. He saw I had the Bhagavad Gita, but he was standing at the other end of the factory, and I was just sitting there stunned. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and that was it. I couldn't say anything. He was there. He saw me, and this experience, it kind of left me as kind of mysteriously as it, and I had to. I thought I could just kind of mechanically bring it back again, and I had no control over the experience. It was something way bigger than me, way, way, way much bigger. And I've just got to turn that thing off. And I was stunned by it. And for me, at that moment, that was my confirmation that actually everything I was doing and deciding to dedicate my whole life to, there was something really, really tangible behind it all. It wasn't just an idea in a book and a whole bunch of people and a teacher. There was a formula, and there was a theory there. I was doing the experiment, and now I was getting the result, and it worked. And I was thinking, this is what they talk about, this term, I kind of got my head around it, Sat Chit Ananda, eternity, knowledge and bliss, which is the kind of the substance, the qualities of spirit, the qualities, the nature of God and my own essential nature. And this was way beyond anything I'd experienced. And the level of soul satisfaction and depth was way beyond even my far out psychedelic experiences. And I was completely straight, nothing in my body at this time. And it was a very big turning point. And that gave me the confidence, really, to go forward with this journey that I was embarking on. And when I met that guy later in the thing, he said, "What was happening to you? There was something happening. I could see something was happening." I said, "Yeah, but I can't tell you about it because it was far out, and it's very difficult to explain." And he just looked at me and went, "Okay." That was that. And so that was very important for me. So I thought I'd just explain that and share that. It is quite an internal, private thing, but it was very crucial in my whole journey, and an affirmation that this philosophy that I was going into, this tradition, with the core of it, which was all about divine love, and which is called prema, it was bona fide, and it was working, and I was on the right path, and it all felt right. Okay, so then the time was ticking away. It was moving into October, and I hadn't got a response yet from Amsterdam, and I decided just to go anyway. And I eventually managed to work at that, to get enough money to pay for my whole journey and have a little bit of pocket money to get to Amsterdam. I had the address, and my friend Mick had been to Amsterdam and stayed with a guy called Shabas, an English guy, and he gave me his address in Amsterdam in case I got there late, because I knew they went to bed late. And so I went on the boat. But to get there, my mother drove me to the station, which is amazing. Here I am, not even 17, with a little rucksack. I said goodbye to my father. It was quite hard. He gave me his electric razor, and which was really nice. I just had this funny old coat that I had on. It was my brother, we used to get coats from jumble sales, and it was a big kind of herringbone, double-breasted coat, overcoat that was slightly tapered. And then I had my patchwork jeans, and I had these funny red boots, and my kaftan, and a few kind of sweaters and shirts, t-shirts. That was it. And my mother drove me off to the station to catch the go down to the Hook of Holland, really, to catch the boat from. Interesting. It wasn't from Dieppe, was it? It was down from Sheerness, I think. Yes, or yeah, to go over to the Hook of Holland, and then go to Amsterdam, and that's what I did. And while I was on the boat, it was really, really rough. This was the 11th of October. It was. I hadn't been on a rough sea ever in my life, and people were. I was sitting kind of on deck, trying to sit away from the edge because it was less like that. It was rocking and rocking, and people were just rushing over to the side and vomiting, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And then I just had to rush over to the edge because I could feel a surge. And as I went to vomit, it's terrible. My hair was quite long. It just kind of blew in the wind, and my vomit went all over my hair, sticking there. And I was going, that was a kind of, I think, a sign from the gods that my hair was shortly to be gone. Somehow or other, I kind of cleaned it off with something and went to the toilet. It was very embarrassing. It was a horrible journey. And I got to Amsterdam quite late. It was already kind of evening. And I had this address, and I went on the tram, and I went around and around. And suddenly I realized I'd gone the wrong way, because then I asked somebody what's happened. And then I realized it was too late to go to the temple. So I thought, go to this guy Seamus's address. And so I went there, knocked on the door, and there was no answer. And then these people looked out, and they said, "Oh no, Seamus has gone." And I said, "Oh," and I said, "I've just come, got this address, and I'm going to go to visit the Krishna temple tomorrow. I've come from England." And they said, "Okay, you can stay here for the night." They were very friendly. They never met me before. So I went upstairs, and guess what? They were devout followers of Guru Maharaji. Everywhere in the house were massive big pictures of him dressed as Krishna, in the toilet, on the walls, everywhere. And they were very kind and friendly. And I think when they knew I was into Krishna, they knew there was a slight difference. We avoided any kind of confrontation, which was great. And they said that the next morning after breakfast, "Well, I'll drive you. It's not that far." So he had his little chevaux. We went down, we drove over. He dropped me by this bridge, and he said, "Just go down there," and there it is, the Bethanienstraat. And this place, he told me, he said, that is all the red light district there. And my mum and dad had been to Holland, and they loved the whole thing. They were very kind of free, and they didn't like the whole idea. It was very free about sexuality. They didn't have hang-ups about that at all. It was quite... anyway, there I was there, but going into the Hare Krishna temple on the Bethanienstraat, and not really knowing at all, except this little thing I'd wrote, having a kind of preconception of what I thought maybe the building was like. And it was a cobbled street, very short, and I kind of walked down, and I was looking, and I got to the end, and I couldn't find it. So I walked back again, and as there was this big white tub outside the house with a big marijuana plant growing in Holland. Amsterdam, I'd never seen anything like it in England. And this guy was just coming out. I said, "Oh, excuse me, I'm looking for the Krishna temple. It's meant to be here." And she said, "Oh yeah, you see that white garage there? It's that." And I looked over, and there was this kind of quite small building, a garage with a big door. And then I went up closer, and then you could see Sri Radha Krishna temple, but they'd newly painted it and painted over the sign. So that's why I couldn't see it. And then there was just a strip of kind of frosted glass, and that was it. And I have to say, my heart sunk. It did. I just suddenly thought, what have I done? Have I made the right decision? Is this the right? I was just literally, I didn't even almost have enough time to have a complete thought about it. And I knocked on the door, not knowing what. And then suddenly this devotee kind of face appeared with a big grin. And it was Ramgati. I didn't know his name then. And I said, "Hare Krishna." I said, I'm Mark. I've come from England. I wrote the letter." And he went, oh, mark the road then, come in, Hare Krishna. And I came into this foyer of this garage, and it was all orange and bright. And this devotee, and I said, I wrote. He said, oh yes, you wrote to Kula Shaker. He's just in a meeting at the moment. Hold on 1 minute, I'll just tell him you're there. And he opened the door. There was this door into this temple room, and he talked in, and he said, "Oh, Kulashekar Prabhu, there's this Mark from England who wrote you a letter." And he called me over, and I put my head through, and Kulashekar said, "Oh, wow, amazing!" And he said, "Look, we're just having a meeting. I'll be out in a minute." Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry I didn't reply back, he said straight away. And I said, it's okay. And I'd gone literally from total despair to kind of, I felt so welcome, and it was. Everybody was smiling, and this was the Hare Krishna temple where everyone smiled at each other. And I'd arrived at my new home. What was it? My goodness. All it was you came in this door, then there was a foyer, there was a little office on one side, and then a small kitchen that went kind of down and narrow, with a door there. And then on your right side, there was a basin for washing hands and somewhere for putting shoes. And then there was a shower and a toilet. And then and then there was some steps upstairs, and that was the official kind of living quarters, because some people slept in the temple room. And it was just this it had a very low roof upstairs, and it had this strip of glass, and it was just, people it just had hardboard on the floor, and that's where and at the end of that space, there was a curtain, and there was one person I found out who was going through a kind of a cold turkey on heroin, and had been suffering from jaundice, and he was a Malaysian chap called Jake, later to get initiated at the same time with me. So I didn't see him at first. Anyway, I came in there, and eventually Kulashekar came out and from the temple room, and then you went into the temple room. And also in the foyer, there was a picture of Krishna, Muli Manohar, by this Indian artist. Very beautiful picture of Krishna, and another poster. It was this colour, the brightness of the orange, and it looked much bigger than what you saw outside, like a TARDIS from Doctor Who. And he went into the temple room, and it had these arches down the side, and then a big curtain at the end, and in one corner a seat for Prabhupada called the Vyasa-san, and pictures of Krishna and Chaitanya down the sides, and with a white floor. It was very light. Everything was very, very light. And then so Kulashekar, who I met just then, he was so friendly. He became he looked after me, really. He was my mate. He was the kind of my mentor at that time. And he had been for many, many. He'd been the first Krishna devotee. And he was just, so many devotees had deep affection for Kulashekar, because he was a personality, and he was very good and talented, very great talker. He had great feelings, emotional feelings. He was artistic. He could play very good drum. He'd actually learnt quite a bit of mridanga playing from Prabhupada. He knew how to give a good lecture. He knew how to do good puja, and he could cook very well. He was good at everything, and he looked really good. He had a nice posture, and he was very enthusiastic and encouraging. And he didn't put any pressure on me that now you're here, you've got to shave your head. He was like slowly, and I had my guitar, and he was so enthusiastic that I think maybe it could have been just then, after just arriving, he asked me to bring my guitar. And he said, do you know any chants and stuff? And I said, yeah, I've got this one chant. So he said, why don't you just come and chant? So the temple room opened, and there was the unusual forms I'd never seen before of Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. They had these kind of quite primitive forms. They weren't like the form of Krishna with the kind of human-y features. They had big eyes, and they were kind of, almost looked like African tribal totems. And it was a very beautiful atmosphere. I like this whole small is beautiful vibe that was here. There was something immediately much more appealing for me than the kind of the Manor for me. I found that it was a bit cliquey at the Manor. There was a group of people over there, a bit here, a bit there. It didn't really, the building wasn't designed for community and bringing people together. Other people may have had very different experiences staying there, but it didn't draw me. And then I came to this very humble garage, converted garage, and the atmosphere, and also the devotees were very warm and very friendly. And I only found out later that quite a few of them were actually out on traveling, and they were going to come back at the weekend. And the females and a couple of the married people, they weren't living there. They were living in another part of Amsterdam where there was a factory for making incense, because that's what Hare Krishnas made some of their money from, was scents and incense sticks. So that's what you had in those days. This garage, the Bethanienstraat, and then Straat, and then you had the this incense factory. And the Bethanienstraat wasn't that far. If you come from Central Station from Amsterdam down to the Dam Square, the main Dam Square, where there's the big kind of building that belongs to the royalty, and then there's a kind of it's their kind of Piccadilly Circus really, and then you go off to the left down the Damstraat towards the red light district, and go over a couple of bridges, and then turn left, and then you are in Bethanienstraat. It's very, very close to the centre of Amsterdam, which I hadn't. I just arrived, so it took me a while, obviously, to get orientated. And so there it was. I just arrived in this lovely, warm community, and I started to go through my journey. So up until now, this whole story and the historical processes have brought us to this point where I have gone through my story. The Krishna movement has gone through its whole journey of expansion, and it's expanded over Europe. It's gone to different places. It's gone from London to Paris, a couple of different places in Germany. In Holland, it had gone to Sweden, Stockholm, and there were Krishna devotees joining the Krishna movement, but it was still relatively small. Different ashrams had different amounts of devotees. We were quite small in Amsterdam, and the community and the story in Amsterdam had gone through its journey over a couple of years. Different people have been involved. And when I joined, Kulashekar wasn't actually what in ISKCON they have a hierarchy. This is a thing that you discover when you join the Krishna movement, is that you've gone through this kind of spiritual, mystical thing. Well, this is my story, okay? Different people come to the Krishna and join it for different reasons and have their own story. But my specific story, I'll speak for myself, is that I had this deep experiences, and I went through this whole journey. The theology attracted me. There was all these things pushing me towards this. And then I'm young. I'm not even 17. I've only had a bit of experience of hanging out with my friends, going to Glastonbury for a week, hanging out with a group of hippies, occasionally going to squats. I've never lived in a community. This is all very new. There's a whole new world in a new country. And when all the devotees who are kind of like committed and live in the temple, because you had to be completely committed, there was no kind of halfway thing at those days. Everybody eventually kind of has the uniform, the look. Everyone has a shaved head. Everyone has a kurta on, has a dhoti. And in those days, it was mostly saffron, because people were, if you hadn't got married yet, you just wore saffron. And there was only a couple of people with white. That was Hare Krishna Das and Vimukta Sangha. Now, Hare Krishna Das hadn't even put on white yet. I don't think he had put on white. He hadn't quite got married, but Vimukta Sangha had. But the president of the temple at the time when I joined, that's what they called temple presidents, who ran the specific units. Above them was what was called a GBC, a General Board Commissioner, basically. I think that's the right term anyway. And there was only 11 of those in the world. And that person who I'd seen in London and who actually passed away just the other day, Hansa Dutta, he was based in Germany, and Amsterdam was under his, it was a zone. A GBC had different temples. There was North Europe, South Europe, in Europe. That was all there was in those days. And Bhagavan was based in Paris, and he was in charge of Southern Europe, but they hadn't really even expanded from Paris to Italy or Spain yet. It was based in France there. And then there was us, and then you had, so in Amsterdam, our temple president I suppose in India you would say it's almost equivalent to a mahant. Mahant might not be the guru or the spiritual preceptor of a specific institution, but the mahant is the person that kind of manages it all. And and they're very respected. And they've got experience. They know how to kind of run the show because it involves people. It's an institution that needs money. It needs things to do the worship, to cook the food, to do reparations, or whatever it is that the ashram is doing. That's what Mahant does. So that's the equivalent of the temple president. And Tulsi Das was from California, as far as I know, and he seems so old, and he was only about 30, maybe 31, but he was quite experienced. He'd been in Los Angeles, and he was had a connection with Prabhupada. He wasn't a GBC, he wasn't, and the other kind of realm of authority in Islam was the sannyasins, but I'll just get to that. So Tulsi Das had a connection with Prabhupada. Kulashekar had a personal connection with Prabhupada. And this is and there was this other devotee who was quite a long time Krishna devotee in Amsterdam, in ISKCON, maybe older than everybody, and that was Patitudharan, who is now called Patita Pavan. It's complicated, but we'll just call him Petit. And he'd been there, he joined, I think, in 67. He'd been in New York and Boston, and he was the most learned of the devotees, and he was there. But Tulsi Das was the president, and he had kind of since he'd been involved since the beginning of 73, this was October, he had organised these travelling parties of Krishna devotees who collect the funds, and it was in a kind of role. It was beginning to expand, and new people had joined that year, in the early part of the year. And they all became, loads of the devotees who I met at this time became my lifelong friends. And one of the persons who, apart from Kulashekar, this other devotee who became my very dear friend and almost like my brother, in fact, everyone was my brother, but I became very close, was Vimukta Sangha, who was from Manchester. And he had quite an active role in the Manor and at Berry Place. And Kulashekar, he were good friends. Kulashekar kind of poached him over to Amsterdam. And he just got married to lovely Nabaswati, who was actually from Pakistan, from a Muslim family, but they got married just very, very recently. And then there was, it was quite cosmopolitan. There was about 3 Germans there. There was Gyana Vigraha, Bibishana, and Hetu. And then one of the most important Dutch devotee was Hare Krishna Das, who I'm still very close with. And there are 3 brothers who originally were called the Kaleman brothers. There was Hans, Jan, and Henk, basically. And Henk became Hare Krishna Das, and Surabi, there was Surabi, the elder brother. He wasn't there, but Surabi, before he'd gone off to India, had actually designed the interior of that garage. He was a designer, an architect, had studied architecture, and quite one of the influential early hippies who'd gone to India in Amsterdam, and he'd been involved with building these other big kind of far out clubs called the Milky Way, and then there was Paradiso and the Cosmos. He'd been specifically involved with the Milky Way, and so Hare Krishnas was there, and he was well known throughout the Krishna movement because he had quite a dark red hair, bright red hair, and he was in charge of the incense, and he kept his hair because he was doing the business of spiritual sky. So he had his hair, and he spoke very, very good English, and he always had a lovely smile, and he gave fantastic talks. And it was through Hare Krishnas that I kind of got the essence. I developed my understanding of the Krishna conscious philosophy, there was who else? And then there was Vishvadevi. There wasn't many females. Vishvadevi, who was from France, she'd been together with her partner Prita Putra, who was in India. He wasn't there now. And they'd known Salvador Dali and a whole bunch of bohemians and freaks down there. A very interesting lady. She's very lovely, lives near Bhaktivedanta Manor now, and she was very talented. And the women were involved with the puja work, and there was a couple of other women, but I can't remember who they were at that time. There wasn't that many people, but there was also a Sri Lankan guy. Now, what was unusual was because everybody wears the uniform, and you just kind of, one of my naiveties, one of the first naiveties to kind of go with maturation was that not everybody is the same. You're always under this illusion that everyone's, everyone's come from a kind of middle class background like me with reasonable parents, and everyone's gone through this kind of mystical journey and had all the same experiences. No. Everybody that was there had their own, it's taken me ages to tell my story. They'd all got their stories that brought them all there. And you're just kind of in this community, and then there was, when they came back from traveling, there was some Americans, there was Italian, there was Mahavidya, there was Mrigapati, who I was going to become very close with. There was Panchamukha, there was Gorachand, who got kicked out a week or so later and actually had to go back to America, so I never saw him for years. But we had Americans, we had Italians, we had quite a few British, we had Dutch, we had a Sri Lankan, and I think we had some other nationalities there, French possibly one or two as well at that time, yes. And all in this community, so it was an incredible experience, really. And it was easy because everybody spoke English, but one day, because I'd only just arrived and getting to know everybody, this Sri Lankan guy who'd been collecting money just disappeared. And apparently he took a bunch of money. And it was just like, how? I was in kind of shock, really, about how that could happen. And so that was kind of a bit of a shock. Not everyone's got the same kind of motives. But one of the, I suppose, the realizations was that what was happening to me now was I'd suddenly gone from being with my family, and I was connected genetically with them and all of what the story had gone. But suddenly now, just by becoming connected with Prabhupada and his movement, the Krishna movement, and this spiritual tradition, I was suddenly now automatically part of a huge international family with centres all over the world. It was 1973. There was quite a few centres had been opened in America, down in South America, Australia, various places of Europe. Temples were being started in India. And all this, and while this was all going on and expanding, Prabhupada, who was old and realised that he was in a frail condition and could pass at any time because he'd already had problems with his heart. He wanted to concentrate on doing his translation work because he wanted this whole volume, very long book with many skandhas or cantos, the Srimad Bhagavatam. He wanted to complete it so that the teachings, if he went, at least the teachings of what he'd come to bring would remain. And he was hoping against hope, that he will have trained people enough that they'd be able to deal with everything. Because, we never really thought about that Prabhupada would pass away, but he was very much aware of it. And so that was his mission. So at that time, there was only, of this series of the Bhagavatam, there was, I think, we just got up to the third canto that was being published. We only had a few books of it. So the amount of information that anybody knew was rather limited. But the person who knew the most was Petit, because he was academic, intelligent, a poet. Well, I say academic, he was literary. And his brother had been a devotee, was super eccentric and left. And we used to have these incredible classes and shares. And this was it was a very, very, when I woke up in the morning, and I was excited to be alive. I was enjoying what I was doing. I didn't have any problem. Even, it was quite clever what Prabhupada did he created this whole system of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, a system of practicing devotional practices and service. It was all very proactive. Everyone was very busy. It wasn't like you join a monk and you go into your cloister and cell and just sit in silence. No, this was all about doing things and being and service. And so what happened was, you didn't even have, you just kind of, the world and all the things that you were attached to, involved with, just kind of disappeared because they got replaced with other things. And there's a verse in the Bhagavad Gita, I can't remember the first, but the one line is Param Dristva Nivartate. Param means higher, and Dristva means taste. That when you get a higher taste, that's how you can give up a lower taste. So you don't have to try artificially to become detached. What you need to do is become proactively attached to spirit, and automatically, hopefully automatically, detachment will come. That's the theory behind it. But it was working for most of us, especially for me. And it was lovely. In the morning, we had these kind of quite quaint, old-fashioned ways of doing things. We used to actually clean the brass with tamarind pulp. So while in the morning, Tulsi Das used to give the Nectar of Devotion class, this book that I had found it hard to get, enter into because it was quite deep. We would have these classes in the morning, and we would be sitting around listening and cleaning the brass. A few people of us would be sitting cleaning all the brass work, and I loved doing that. I thought, this is what I've dropped out for, to clean brass in the early hours of the morning, while Amsterdam and all of that is going on, the sensual capital, sex, drugs and rock and roll capital of the world practically. And there we are sitting in this little kind of cocoon, this warm, cozy cocoon in this Krishna bubble. In fact, this is a term that I call this world that I just entered into, I call it the hypnotic bubble. Because that's basically what happened. I've just stepped into this world, and the other world is out there, is outside the bubble. Now the bubble not just includes this centre in Amsterdam, but that specifically, but this tribe and this family around the world. And there was one day at the very early days of all of this, when I was just getting used to it, there was this one description in the Nectar of Devotion about the different moons. I don't know if it's 21 different moons. They're all on different parts of body, the different fingertips of Krishna, the different parts of his hair, his face. They're all considered like moons. It's like an incredible meditation on the form of Krishna, because this is what bhakti is all about. It's about meditating on the form of Krishna, which is spiritual, and developing a love affair, really, with the divine transcendental Godhead, the personality of Godhead. And that term, a lot of people don't like it, but anyway, that's the term that we were using. And after this class and this meditation and doing the service and the sadhana and the focus, we then did our japa. And I had my beads at this time, and there was a lovely poster we had on the wall of Nanda Kumar, a name of Krishna. And it was done by another famous Indian artist that I'll get to meet later, called Indra Sharma. And the style of painting was slightly modern, but he'd done with airbrush. So this kind of moon effect was beautifully depicted. And this was the first time in terms of japa that I had this incredible experience where I just chanted the japa and chanted the japa and chanted the japa. I was just hearing the mantra and gazing and absorbed in the form of Krishna, like really I'd never done before. It was wonderful. And then, when the devotees see you, they're doing their japa, they see that you're absorbed, everyone kind of smiles and gives you encouragement, and then because they know that you're in a nice bhakti zone. And that's what was lovely about this the Krishna temple at that time. Another person I should mention who's very wonderful at this time was Paravida. And Paravida may have been traveling at the beginning and then came back to the temple. But he is one of the big, long-standing, amazing Hare Krishna devotees in the whole of the movement. And he was there in Amsterdam. And he's hardly changed in his whole life. And he's very deeply involved with Krishna in a deep emotional sense. And I think he's got some Indonesian blood with him. And he's very musical and artistic. And he'd been part of the Godspell musical before joining the Krishna movement. So he was there. And these are all these lovely devotees that we were having lovely, deep conversations. They were so sincere, and I was having such a lovely time. And I was feeling blessed that Krishna had guided me to Amsterdam. So there I was, plugged in to this new family in Amsterdam, in this bubble, but also connected to all these Krishna temples around the world. We had these Back to Godhead magazines with pictures, and I could see I was becoming aware of this whole. We had these cassettes that were played, and I'll say, "Who is that? Oh, that is Bhadaraj in New York. Oh, that is Yogeshwara. That is so and so chanting Hansadutta in Germany. This is that, and that's Prabhupada." And you get used to it because we were all kind of like listening to these tapes when we were cooking in the kitchen, and. I think I'm going to leave it there now because I also so apart from being this is the kind of the connection of the tribe that I've been connected to, but there was the spiritual paradigm. You see, you get connected to the whole pantheon of the Vedic pantheon of gods. Suddenly there's a connection to Shiva, to Ganesh, to the goddesses, all the different forms of Krishna, all the different avatar, all the different teachers in the lineage. You become connected to this cosmic family. So there I am. I've just come from southwest London, from Hampton, and not wondering what to do with my life. Now suddenly I'm in a garage in the red light district of Amsterdam with some very enthusiastic people from all over the world who've gone through a big story to be there. We're all together, and it's all changing rapidly. Week by week, day by day, developments are taking these. I've just joined at this moment where the Krishna movement is expanding like this all over the world, mid-70s. If you see pictures of the Ratha Yatra festivals in San Francisco, you watch 68, 69, 70, 71. It's incredible the amount of people involved, the volume, how it grows within those years. It's absolutely phenomenal. So I just joined this. I was right, the Krishna movement was on a wave, and I just joined and I was part of it. So I'm going to carry on that story maybe tomorrow, if not tomorrow, the day after. I might have a day off tomorrow. Let's see. I'm going to sing you a song now from the Bindu Babas. And I knew what I was going to sing earlier. What was I going to sing? We've got about 12 songs. I think I'm going to sing "Walk in the Park," really, because this is all about having a conversation with God, and God talking back to you. The idea is that you're walking, and you could be walking anywhere. You're unwinding from stress, from anxiety, and then you connect with nature. Your mind comes out of its anxiety, and you become prayerful. Think of God, and then God talks back to you. Conversation with God. Walking in the park one day, must have been springtime. Never find time to pray, left alone to unwind. I feel my spirits rise, tingling in my spine. I find as I close my eyes, peace within my own mind. Oh Lord, and I thank you for this day. I know your love is the only way. You hold all the answers in your hand. Lord, won't you talk to me that I might understand? Ooh, 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 Bhagawan Bole. Why deny my love? I've always been there for you, and always will be too. guiding everyone along the journey home. You never walk alone. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can find me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can find me. You need to surrender. Put your trust in me. And always remember, your faith will set you free. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Oh Lord, and I thank you for this day. I know your love is the only way. You hold all the answers in your hands. Please won't you talk to me that I might understand. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can guide me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can guide me. Deep in your heart you'll find me. Only the purest love can bind me. Haribo. Ah, so nice, wonderful. It's been lovely to be able to share again with everybody, old friends, new friends, people from all around the world, and this story that we're all going, it's not relenting. Many of my friends, a bit like me, not everybody, everyone's dealing with it their own way. I've just come a bit exhausted by all of the different theories and the different things about what it could be and what it couldn't be, and it's creating so much division, and there's a possibility to kind of like people be defriending each other for all sorts of reasons, and it doesn't really need to go on that way, but everyone's got to do what they've got to do, and I just think that we should all try to preserve our spiritual power, keep as steady as we can, despite whatever it is. Even I just read a quote from Carl Jung. He says, "It's all about, this is the yogic principle. Whatever's going on, maintain a kind of equilibrium. Don't get disturbed. Stay in your power, because you have your own spiritual autonomy. You don't have to get caught up in everything in the world, even if it's of whatever level it is." Okay, but of course there are also very harrowing things that people are going through. People are going through all sorts of crises with health and facing the virus. But even if the virus wasn't here, we'd be having to face lots of things anyway, because this is the nature of the material world. So it's always good to try and find silver linings, try and stay in your power, and still manage to find some joy in this life, this wonderful, mysterious life that we live in and share. Hari Om. I will put a notice up tomorrow telling you if I'm going to be sharing tomorrow or not. Take care. Look after yourself. And thank you again. Share with others as well, who you think might find interesting.